After my brother Jeremy took his own life, I found that he made a promise to reach out. I then started to get guided down a path. Another spirit guide by the name of Richard would also join, and our research would take a different turn, including a very different communication method. Towards the end of August this year, I was experiencing a lot of issues that were going on. People leaving, abandoning me, and so many other issues going on that it started to make me almost walk away from the paranormal field. At the beginning of September, I ended up having a really weird lucid dream. It started with me sitting at my parents' place on the couch in the center, and I was watching what looked like either a Jesus movie or documentary, but it was going backwards. I was watching Jesus getting whipped and beaten, and then it stopped when it got to the part where the one soldier's ear got cut off, and it showed Jesus putting the ear back on. I remember thinking to myself, how could people hate someone who loved them so much? And then immediately, after thinking this in the dream, I heard my brother on my left say, "Because it's easier to hate than it is to love, John." And I immediately looked over and I saw my brother sitting there in his lab coat. He then leans over, looking past me, and goes, "Are you ready?" And I look over and I see spirit guide Richard sitting next to me. But he too was wearing a lab coat. This confused me because, as far as I know, he never wore a lab coat, based off of knowing what his career was. Both of them got up, and I remember turning to them and going, "What is the purpose of all this?" They both turned and looked at me. Richard turned and gave me a stern look, and he said to me, "Love and understanding." And then Jeremy said, "See you at Wildwood." Then he looked at me with a stern look, pointed at me and said, "Put your coat back on." And then they walked away. The coat he's referring to is the lab coat that Jeremy once wore that I now wear in his memory that he used to wear on my paranormal team. The next time I went to Wildwood Sanitarium, I remember thinking about that dream and how throughout these last few years, Jeremy has been helping, and then Richard has been helping. But I'm wondering why. Why do you believe in me so much? And I had to ask the question about the paranormal research in general. There are so many people that say that I'm potentially able to crack the code with some of this stuff that you and I studied. Do you actually believe that I'm actually capable of doing this?
Shadows whisper through the night. In the dark, no sign of a light. I feel the weight crushing down. Ghostly whispers all around. Every failure haunts my mind. Lost in thoughts I cannot find. Broken dreams, my shattered faith. Spirit voices softly say, believe in you when shadows fall. Rise above through it all. Listen to the ghosts they know. In the darkness you will grow. Haunted by the things I've done. seeking answers from none. Whispers echo in my ear, tell me not to live in fear. Spectral visions in my sight, guiding me into the light. Through the veil their voices send courage now, my broken friend. Believe in you when shadows fall, rise above through it all. Listen to the ghosts they know, in the darkness you will grow. Believe in you when shadows fall, rise above through it all. Listen to the ghosts they know, in the darkness you will grow.
The one thing I know when it came down to Spirit Guide Richard, when he passed, his passing affected his child. Jeremy and Richard have a tendency to give signs, and they know that I look for numbers. So since both of them have the numerology life number of 4, I asked Jeremy to use the number 9, which is my numerology life number, along with the number 4. And then for Richard to try to use number 4, and then the number 7, which is connected to his child. As I was walking into a parking lot to one of the restaurants near my place, I remember getting a feeling, and this feeling like someone was nearby. And then I ended up hearing the voice of Richard say, "Go and talk to him." And I got an image in my mind of me talking to some person over by a pole. And when I turned and I looked, there was a person sitting by a pole that appeared homeless. When I went up to him, I introduced myself and said, "Hey, I've seen you around, want to help if I can. And it seems like you're going through a rough time." And he looked at me and he said, "Ever since my father passed away, I've never been the same. My life has fallen apart." I was shocked when I heard this. It stopped me in my tracks. I looked back at him, collected my thoughts, and then I remembered, I started to think about how my brother's death affected me, how it affected my parents, how it really just ripped apart our lives. And then it started to put me in the shoes of Richard's child. What would it be like to not have their father? I said, "I'm sorry to hear about this. Let me buy you some lunch." I went in, bought him a large meal, came back out, and I handed him the meal, but on the last thing when I handed him the drink, he grabbed onto the drink, and I remember looking at him dead in the eyes and said, "Do not give up." And I remember seeing his eyes looking like they were starting to tear up. And he said, "I won't." As I was walking away, I heard him say, "Thank you, God." I then remember taking out my phone and looking at the time. When I did the numbers, it came out to 4, and when I did the military time, it came out to 7.
There's so many things that have happened to me, uh, some that are just so unexplainable, kind of hard to categorize them as anything else. Things like um, being diagnosed with a terrible illness that resulted in a multitude of surgeries, um, being in multiple car accidents, one of which I was pronounced dead initially and brought back to life. I think about all the things that I've been through in my life, uh, the horrible things that I've overcome, but also the good that I've done on the back end and kind of being in the right place at the right time. And on February 1st, 2009, it's kind of like my rebirth, when I had one of my final major surgeries that was intended to help save my life and give me a better quality of life. Um, and since then, I have done a lot of incredible good, uh, including saved several lives. I met John at an event that him and I were featured in a live event. That event was wonderful. We had a blast. It wasn't within a couple days before I had reached out to him and invited him to our Lake Shawnee lockdown event.
She offered 2 different dates. I did do a dowsing rod session with Jeremy and Richard and asked, is there a specific date that I should go, or does it even matter? They said November 5th. On that day, I went to the ATM and took out the money for the entry fee for the event. As I was getting ready to walk away, I had that strange feeling again from the incident on October 17th with the homeless person. Like somebody was there, right there with me, and then I saw an image of me taking out an extra $100. So I went and I took out an extra $100, recognizing that last time something prominent did happen.
He ended up being the only other person there with us. There should have been 12 of us in total. It was just him, my partner John, and myself. Ironically, I clearly didn't plan very well because it happened to be the same night as the election, to which we both found that we were voting for the same candidate. And this became this definitely an interesting paranormal investigation, because while we were investigating, we were also glued to our phones watching the polls.
The morning of November 6th came. I hung around with Jacqueline as she was packing up. And then, before they were getting ready to leave, I had left.
When I turned the car on, when I turned the car on initially, I heard like a tick, 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 tick noise, and I thought, okay, that's the battery. Maybe I killed the battery leaving the doors open, even though that shouldn't have happened, so I didn't even have the lights on. But that's just what I was thinking. It's a new car. What else could it be? And then when I tried to turn it again, every light on that dashboard, it was like the car was possessed. I mean, flashing lights everywhere. Every car on the dashboard, not just the behind the steering wheel, but the dashboard was lighting up, and it kept saying things like engine failure, ABS failure, this failure, that failure, seek maintenance now. Like, it was going crazy. My heart sank. It sank. But I immediately was like, let me get a hold of John before he gets too far.
Minutes after leaving, I received a phone call from Jacqueline saying their vehicle won't start. Is there any way I could potentially jump their vehicle? And without hesitation, I turned right around to go help them.
Now let me just set the stage a little bit for you. Shawnee is in the middle of, like, technically, it's the center of a mountain, 360 degrees of mountain. So you have the mountainside up all around you, and it's set down into a field, acres and acres and acres, like 80 acres or something. But there's nothing else around. We are in the backwoods of West Virginia. There's nothing. There's nowhere on the property that we could seek help. John was literally it.
When I got there, we tried to jump the vehicle, and the vehicle would not start.
I had a whole day of driving ahead of me to take care of my father, who was not doing well. When I saw that he like we couldn't jump the car. The pain that came over me, the fear that came over me, I wanted to vomit. Like, it was so horrifying to think, not only am I stranded 7 hours from home, I'm stranded when I need to be in my father's house by nightfall because his wife was leaving town and I had to be there to go stay with him and take care of him. My father had a quadruple heart bypass, a massive heart attack, in April. And all I could think was, who is going to take care of my dad? He's not well. He can't be alone. What am I going to do?
I saw Jacqueline crying, and I remember her telling me how her father wasn't doing well and she needed to get to her father. As soon as the event was over, she needed to drive to her father in Cape Cod.
I still tried to hold those tears in. But the more and more I thought about my father being alone and something happening to him, the more I could feel I'm getting like choked up, the more I could feel the weight of, if anything happens to him, I will never forgive myself, ever.
I ended up putting myself in her shoes and going, I can't imagine being without her father. Like, if she loses her father, this could ruin her life. She's told me she's a daddy's girl, that her father is her inspiration. I remember looking down at the $100, pulling it out of my pocket and looking at it and going, what is this really gonna do? I mean, I wanna give it to her, but it's like, what is this really gonna do? Especially if her vehicle's completely dead. I remember getting that feeling again of someone there, and I heard my brother's voice, John, you know what to do. So immediately I went over to my vehicle, pulled out the dowsing rods, and asked, I take it this is not my money. Am I given all of this or some of this? It swung to all of it. And then I heard Richard's voice say, trust the process. My final question was Jacqueline even going to accept this? And they said, no. But that told me I had to push. I called over to Jacqueline, walked up to her with the money in hand, and I said, after everything that I've seen happen since April, especially since April of this year with Jeremy and Richard, I need to give you this. They're telling me you need to have it. I don't know what for, but you need it. She kept on refusing over and over and over again, saying she didn't feel comfortable taking it, that she didn't want to take it. And I kept on pursuing and saying, you need this. Trust the process.
I've done everything I possibly could for friends and family my whole life, but I never really had someone that would completely go out of their way, just a random act of kindness for me. So he said, again, take this. And that's when I finally just reached forward. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to look at his hands. And he handed me money in my hand. And I said, I really don't feel like doing this, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And he said, trust the process. Again.
When I got in the car to leave, I saw it was 1:03 p.m. Took a snapshot, again, the number 4, and then a military times 7. And then I left. I said, God, it's all in your hands now. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to help, and please help her get to her father.
The record comes back, and he says, ma'am, I don't take anything but cash, right? I said, oh, shoot, I forgot to check how much was in my wallet. I said, oh, yeah, no problem. And I scoot over to my wallet, pull it out, and I count. And I said, how much is it, sir? And he goes, it's $100 even. And as I'm counting, John had given me $100 even. When I tell you, my heart, which was beating out of my chest, it was like time stood still. I'm like, what are the chances that he gave me exactly $100. So right before I was getting on I had rented a car and was getting ready to go home because I had to get home no matter what it took. Um, and I had literally gotten to the point where I was having to make miracles happen to get out of it. So just as I'm getting ready to rent this car, my phone rings. It's the mechanic shop. Mind you, when I spoke to them in the morning after the car was towed there, their mechanics who'd been in the job for 30 years had no clue what was wrong with it. The mechanic himself said, "This is a brand new car and a high-end car. Like, this should not be happening." And the worst part is, I plugged it into our computer, the one that tells us what's wrong. It's zeros across the board. It won't even read your car. It won't even read your car. We have no clue what's wrong with it, ma'am, and I don't know how to fix it. What am I going to do with that, right? That's when I really started to panic. Just as I'm getting ready to rent this car, my phone rings. It's that mechanic shop, and I get a little chuckle over the phone, and it's, "Well, we fixed your car." And I said, "What? You just told me 30 minutes ago that you couldn't fix it. You had no clue what was wrong with it." She says, excuse me, again, I choked up again. In 30 years, I have never seen this. We have never seen this as a garage. I said, "Okay, what?" She said, "When the car was dead, we couldn't get it to start. And it was stuck inside the garage, and we had other cars behind it that we had to get out. So the mechanic was going to try kind of an old mechanic's trick to get the car to slip into neutral so they could push it out. And he went underneath, whatever, and said that as he reached up into wherever it is, into the car, he found that the fuel pump connector had been disconnected." What? I said, "What? How does that happen?" She said, "Ma'am, I don't know, but we fixed it. You're good to go." My whole ride there, I just kind of felt like this warm kind of blanket over me. And what really brought tears to my eyes and shocked me was the song by Little Walter came on, "Everything is Gonna Be All Right." And then not a couple minutes later, Journey, "Don't Stop Believing" came on. And I sat back and I was like, "Okay, I hear you, Spirit. Like, I hear you talking to me now." And at that point, I actually said a little prayer and thanked Jeremy and Richard and John for getting me out of what really was an impossible situation. I was able to finally, after 27 grueling hours of being outside in the cold and the rain, and an immense amount of traveling, made it to Cape Cod. I get to my dad's house, and things were far worse than I had thought. It's in bad shape. It was in really bad shape. By the time I'd gotten him, he was sepsis. The sepsis had been ravaging his brain and his bloodstream. His breathing and oxygen tanked below 78, which is extremely dangerous. He had an infection so bad that his fever was like 103. And he was delirious. Couldn't formulate words, couldn't hold himself up. I had no choice but to call an ambulance within hours of being there. When we got to the hospital, I realized how bad things were. He had gone into shock right in front of me in the hospital. The trauma team had to rush in and give him all sorts of meds and do all sorts of things. And the doctor looked at me and said, "One more day. Maybe not even a whole one, but just one more day. Your dad would have been gone. You got him here just in time to save his life."
Here's one of the crazy things about this. Jacqueline was born in the same month as Spirit Guide Richard's child. Jacqueline has the same numerology number of 7. And Jacqueline's father's name is also Richard.
Now that I know what I know, it's surreal to think about how Spirit places us where they need us to be, or where we need them to be, in retrospect, where we need them to be at the right time, and how God and Spirit place people in our paths in our life to help us. It's mind-boggling. And I think about all the things that we went through, or that I went through, and again, as I mentioned before, John being in that right place at that right time, and the both of us trusting a process that we had no clue what we were even trusting it for. I still believe that there is a greater good behind all of it. When Richard said, trust that process, I knew it was meant for my father, but I think it was meant for so much more.
I admittedly say, at times, I call out to God and say, where's my light within the darkness? But what gives me hope over these 38 years is seeing all the times that hope was given to somebody when I was able to help in some way. Jeremy and Richard have led me down quite the unique path, but there's two other spirits that we need to talk about. Dr. Henderson and Nurse Sue of Wildwood Sanitarium, both spirits that my brother Jeremy and Richard interact with. We're going to talk about how Wildwood Sanitarium, known as a place of healing and a place where people receive messages from lost loved ones, continue to help. From my dear friend Katie making contact with her brother, to my friend Alyssa making contact with her long-lost pet, and then a father's quest to reach their child.
Did you say it's you? Who's you? Who are you?
Help me reach my child tonight. Guide my words so clear and bright. In the silence, hear my plea. Bring my love back home to me.